Welcome to the Caleb Parker Show, Dave.
Hey, thanks for having me, my brother.
Dude, it's been 2 years since we've done this. We did it in Toronto, I believe, last time.
Think?
With Steve, with Shed.
Oh, yeah, we did. Yeah, and you did that with John Ruffalo and Steven.
Yes.
And then me and you, I was there, but my daughter got sick and I had to leave that recording studio, if you remember.
But you participated at the end of Shed's podcast episode.
I did. But then we did it again with Dan Harvey.
Yes, we did.
And yeah, I was living in Toronto at the time. Last time we recorded.
Tokenization of real estate with Dan Harvey.
Yeah, that's right.
Big shout out to Dan. Look, before we get started here, can I hear the former self-loathing office broker say once and for all, does the office have a role in the future of work?
Yeah, 100%.
Well, you heard it here on the Caleb Parker Show. Dave Cairns believes the office should exist in the future.
I wouldn't be working where I am right now if I didn't think so.
Look, I have a lot of appreciation for everything you put out on LinkedIn. Okay, almost everything. I think you can write a little bit shorter sometimes, but that's just my preference. No, I think, you've very much been leaning into the future. And on my podcast, I've really been focused on shining a light on people who lean in, who test, who aren't afraid to get it wrong and get a lot of it right and share what they get right and what they get wrong. You're not the only person out there that thinks like you do, but not many people are as brave to get up and share like you do. So for anybody out there in office real estate, in corporate real estate, who maybe don't have that courage that you have right now, what sort of advice would you give them?
Okay. My daughter said something. I'm going to read it. And then I wrote something in the comments section of a post too that I have a screenshot of that I'm also going to read that I haven't written about yet. So I think that listening to kids is just so fundamentally important because they haven't been shamed enough yet and become more shadow-like versions of themselves like all of us adults have. So they say things that sound very obvious to them that are extremely, extremely challenging to live out as an adult with all the different shit that we have to deal with. So she said to me the other day, don't stop being yourself. It's bad not to be yourself.
Those are wise words from your daughter. How old is she?
She's 6. And it's not complicated, right? But it's just hard, is the thing. So I would say, try your best to think like what my daughter just said. And if I don't end up wasting our time trying to find something that I wrote the other day, if not, I can just riff on it. Yeah, here it is. Okay. The crazy thing is that credentials don't even matter for employees anymore. I created a new job for myself because I put out a brand. Our brand is our currency for better and for worse in this world. And so I don't say for better or for worse. It's for better and for worse. What I'm doing online is really hard in every respect. Like, it takes me away from being present a lot of the time because I'm constantly thinking about what I'm going to write next. Like, it puts me at a rapport with my family sometimes, just to be completely candid, right? I'm subject to criticism, as you know.
You used to be subject to disclaimers at the bottom of your LinkedIn post.
Yeah.
How does it feel not to have that anymore?
It's very relieving. It's very, very relieving.
So, okay. So what sort of advice would you give leaders who have policies for disclaimers?
I just think they're not realizing the times that they live in, right? Like, rather than being worried that your employees are going to say the wrong thing, you should recognize that employee-led personal brands are actually the future of your brand. Seems counterintuitive, but it is the case. And the reality is, just like employees have more power than employers in terms of where they work, there's lots of people who disagree with me, but the data suggests currently that they're not right, and I am. The ones who see this and see it as a net positive for their employees to go out there and speak are going to be the winners, just like the ones who make the workplace, a product and make flexibility something that's offered in a democratized way at scale within their organizations. These are the companies that are going to win too.
It's a bit of a paradigm shift, I think, for leaders in business right now, because it used to be that the best polished person is who represented the brand. But customers today, well, neither am I. And, thankfully we can edit some of these episodes to make me sound more polished. But today, customers, consumers, they want authenticity. So when we're not polished, it actually makes us more human. But leadership that's learned a certain way, has been around for a long time, who has a lot of wisdom on so many things, it's a paradigm shift for them. And so I think that the concept of personal brands is one aspect, but that leads into so many other things that we're talking about.
Just to linger on that for a minute, I want to read something else again. And this is why I love working at Kadence. And shout out to our CEO, Dan, who, gives me the latitude to say what I think. I'm going to anonymize this. I'm not going to say who said it, but I shared a personal post about my experience being raised by a single father and what it means to be a man to me in a modern context, right? I shared that post with an ideal customer profile of Kadence, okay? And this is what the person says in response to me. Powerful post, takes a lot of confidence and self-reflection to get to that point, so hats off to you. I'm building rapport through sharing of my life with corporate customers. So that's another layer, right? Like, it's not even just about being authentic about your opinions, about the industry that you work within. It's actually about sharing yourself. And the key, Caleb, is you can't undershare and you can't overshare, because undersharing doesn't give anybody any value. Like, if it's too vague what your trials and tribulations are in life, people can't bring in their own experience to what you are sharing about yourself. And if it's oversharing, everybody has a vulnerability hangover, particularly the person that's saying it or writing it. So it's a total dance to figure out where is the line there. And what I've found is that the only way I've been able to figure it out is by practicing in public.
Again, very, very brave. I have to admit, there's been plenty of times where I've started writing something and should I really post this? And there have been times where I haven't posted it, for better, for worse, or better and worse, as you would say. But I think what we're talking about here is humanity, and business is about relationships, and people change jobs, people get promotions, people change cities, people change careers, but ultimately relationships are what matters. And, whether that person is a coworker today, a friend tomorrow, a client the next day, or in some other order, we're all still people. And I think what you're talking about is bringing humanity back to business, in my opinion.
Yep, I am.
So, okay. Well, let's use that as a segue to talk about something a little bit closer to corporate real estate and office real estate. So we won't talk about the big debates and the headlines around office and return to work and
Blah, blah, blah.
blah, blah, blah. But I do want to bring up this LinkedIn post that we played at the beginning of this episode, because I thought what you said was very interesting, and I want you to elaborate a little bit. You talked about companies not being efficient because everybody's, not come back to the office yet. They're efficient because they haven't basically changed their way of working to acknowledge how we work today, if I paraphrase what you said. So I think we can all agree that it's not one or the other anymore. I've always said hashtag plus not versus, but the word hybrid comes up, and I think a lot of people get tired of the word hybrid. But in reality, hybrid means doing things in more than one way, or a blend of ways. And so I guess my question is, will the word hybrid go away? And, will we just call it working one day?
I think the word hybrid will go. I think so. There's two sides to hybrid. One is we need words in life to help us understand highly disruptive change. And we all went through a workplace experiment that was basically a side effect of COVID, right? And so we need these words literally for employees, by example, to understand what kind of a role am I applying to? Am I applying to an in-office role? Am I applying to a remote role? Or am I applying to one that's in between? So just even for that simple example, we need these terms, right? But we need them as a way of just framing conversation, framing debate, blah, blah, blah. We used to call it was called telecommuting, right? What a strange term, taking the idea of commuting and just saying, well, it's actually just, you're phoning it in. That's basically what we're saying.
That's like a nice government word.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And we don't say it anymore, right? So that's sort of why I think it's going to go away at some point. But we need it right now. Nick Bloom has talked about the fact that you can't find the word hybrid work prior to the pandemic. Maybe that's wrong, but it was not a widely used term, right? So the only reason I can come up with that it's here is because there's a reason for it, right? And we can talk ourselves in circles around why we're mad about it. But like the zeitgeist is the zeitgeist. We don't decide. The world decides, right, for us. But the other aspect of it, and I think part of why people are sick of it is clearly there for capitalistic reasons, right? Like it's a great term to use to sell products and services. And that's life too.
We need to sell products and services to have an economy go, but we won't dive into that. I guess follow-up question to that is, if we're going to continue using the word hybrid, maybe it will go away one day or maybe it won't, but it means different things to different people. It's the connotation that people give it. And when you've got some companies mandating a certain number of days, other companies not really mandating anything, what are you hearing? You talk to corporate real estate people all the time. What are you hearing from them?
I think they're in a really, really challenging spot. Most people that I talk to that are in the world of workplace really care about people. Like, take the whole extroversion thing out of it, that they maybe like to be around people. I don't even think all necessarily are that way, but they all have an undying interest in helping other people have more than decent days, right? So they are trying and have always been trying to evolve that and make it better. But now they're dealing with directives from senior executives in the C-suite that I think a lot of the time they don't even necessarily agree with, but they're still there trying to like move the needle a little bit, because they really care about helping people. But they're trying to find ways to actually honor the requests of senior executives that may or may not even be aligned with their own values, but in a way that is from the employee's perspective and for the employee's benefit. And so, like, I really have a lot of respect for these individuals. Every time I talk to them, we always end up having constructive conversations. Like, even when we disagree, I think the really cool thing about workplace leaders is that they are not hopelessly romantic about one end of the spectrum or the other. They're actually highly curious, highly inquisitive people for the most part, trying to figure it out. And yeah, it's not an easy job.
So in the spirit of shining a light on people leaning into the future and testing and sharing what they learn and the good things and the bad, what is success starting to look like in corporate real estate? Policies or non-policies, or what's coming out of that world that's working?
I mean, I'd rather talk about what bleeding edge companies are doing differently as sort of like a bellwether for the change that's around the corner that may become more average over time. And the reason for that is if I were to answer that question more directly at this early stage in our conversation, it would basically just be a sales pitch for Kadence.
Okay.
I don't necessarily want to go there yet, or maybe at all, but I love people like Annie Dean. A lot of people know her, but it's funny that I encounter as many people almost that don't know her. And so if you don't know her, you gotta follow her. And she talks a ton about how, the problem that we have here is that it's not about where we work, it's about how we work. So I'll give some of her anecdotes and share some data, but before I do that, I'm going to digress for a second and share paraphrase statement from Stuart Butterfield, the former CEO of Slack. And he said it in like 2022, I think. And basically what he said is, imagine if instead of a global pandemic that locked us out of our offices, we instead got to keep going to the office, but we had no internet. Like, I'll pause for a second.
Well, the pause would be what happens to the world, because it would fall off the edge, it would end.
Yeah, exactly. And again, for better and for worse, we could say, not, for better or for worse, we could say for better and for worse. Like, it's not like my wife says to me that she wants to live in days of yore, but with Spotify. The only thing that she wants to bring back in time with her to more simpler times is Spotify. She doesn't want to bring Instagram. She doesn't want to bring TikTok. She doesn't want to bring Netflix. She just wants to bring music with her in her pocket, right? So like, that's why I say for better and for worse, we're so reliant on the internet, right? And so what again, like I'm going to pull this up because like you'll remember this, like people got so mad in the real estate industry when the CEO of Shopify said this 2 months into the pandemic, okay? As of today, this is May of 2020. As of today, Shopify is a digital by default company. We will keep our offices closed until 2021 so that we can rework them for this new reality. And after that, most will permanently work remotely. Office centricity is over. Okay. The industry got so mad. They went totally red. They didn't hear that he said they're going to keep them closed and then rework them. Right. He didn't hear, they didn't understand the nuance of office centricity being over, not the office, but office centricity being over. Right. So like, those are some anecdotes. Now let me share like the research, like the people that are shining a light are people like Annie Dean. They put out, Atlassian put out a report called 1,000 Days Working Distributed or something like that, right? Now, I'll call out with total respect that they have a stake in, selling digital collaboration tools. So, of course, distributed working, remote working, flexible working, these are all things that are very good for their business. But I still think they're coming at it from an objectively correct lens. So,
And let me stop you there for a second, because the same sort of conversation in defense of the office with people who have a vested interest in the office, those conversations come out as well. And a lot of those sound logical. Why is that different than what Andy's putting out?
well, first and foremost, they're not saying that they aren't going to use offices. They have 12 offices globally. They have an office strategy. They're not getting rid of them, right? So they're not actually in any way saying offices aren't important. In fact, I know Annie, and we're talking a lot about Annie. I'm a huge fan of her, so anyway, she knows that. But they talked about their offices being cultural shrines, even in a world where they're not used nearly in the way that they were before, right? But like, let's just look at the data that they put out. So in fiscal year 2020, Atlassian's hires were 14% remote. So what they call remote is anything that's 2 hours or more from an office. It's like really convenient to get there. So 14% of the hires they were making in 2020 were remote. By 2023, that number went up to 57%. And they highlight directly in the report that that number will just continue to grow. And so that's what Tobias, whatever his last name is from Shopify, was saying. Office centricity is over, not the office centricity. And so I don't believe by any stretch of the imagination that the average Fortune 500 company or the average company in general could or should change how they work to the degree that Atlassian and others like them, Dropbox, Spotify, Shopify, whatever, all these bleeding edge tech companies. I don't believe they can or should do that. But I think it's really, really valuable to observe what these companies are doing. Because another stat I'll share, Flex Index has put out research that says, I may be butchering this, so someone can correct me if I'm getting it slightly wrong, but the younger the company, the more amenable they are to flexible and remote working. So something like 97 or 98% of companies that were founded 2011 to today do not have any mandated policy for going to office. A lot of them have offices, but they have no policy.
Well, you recently listed, I don't know, maybe 20 companies in a post that didn't exist pre-2012, I think it was. Maybe, and all of these companies are enabling these new ways of working. And if I dive into that last statement you made about new companies that start today are more amenable, that's pipeline, or used to be pipeline as they grow for the office industry. So I think if we agree that office centricity is over, I agree. And we agree that the office has a major role to play in the platform of work. What does the office need to look like? So if we go back and dial it back to what your conversations at the corporate real estate level, what does the future of office look like? What does it need to look like?
I think it has a lot less to do with like desks and stuff. And so I'll try to give you like an analogy that makes sense to me. We create all this digital art now. You can just like prompt a AI to create images and art for you, stuff like that. The imperfection and the rawness and the beauty of something created by someone's hand is not going to become less valuable in a world that's flooded with digital artwork. It's only going to become more valuable. It may be more scarce and less available or around us, but that's only going to do something to make it more valuable, right? Like, I may be screwing this up, but I think like Gen Zs have become obsessed with like digital cameras and like sort of like imperfect pictures. They're going back into history and trying to connect to things that existed before they were born, like Friends, the show Friends, like, and so I'm not trying to suggest that it's about nostalgia. I'm not saying the office of the future will be about nostalgia. I think it will be about being human and coming together. Like, it's a meeting place. Like, I think of it almost more like going back in time. Like, people used to meet in churches and like community centers, and like they were these gathering places, right? The world needs these gathering places to have a resurgence, not just for the sake of work, but for the sake of like every part of our lives. And so I think there are these meeting places, and they have to be centrally located, a lot of them, in areas that are convenient for distributed teams to get to, be that like at a macro level in a city like London, like where we're sitting right now, or at a micro level in a location within a city that's easy for people to get to from a million different directions. And so to me, they're meeting places for one. But then again, I'll cite some research that, again, Atlassian's finding. Without having any mandate, they're finding that something like 26% of people that live within commuting distance to one of their offices are coming in 1 to 2 times a week. So it still represents a relatively small proportion of their overall workforce, but nonetheless, those workplaces are needed for people to do their jobs, right? Whether they don't have a good setup at home, whether they're in a particular season of life. Like, what if somebody like gets a divorce? Maybe they want to go to the office more. Like, there's 7 million permutations of all those types of examples. So to me, it holds those practical sort of value propositions. And then it also holds these more like, not nostalgic, but like breaking bread kind of reasons.
If I gave a one-liner of what you just said, I'd say the office of the future is a meeting space. It's an event space.
I think it's a meeting place.
Okay. It's a good...
Because space to me takes away some of that like human connection. Like a meeting place, a gathering spot, a watering hole, whatever. That draws out emotion.
I like it. So look, I think the big challenge around this change is if the office is becoming a meeting place for distributed people to come together at whatever frequency, and it needs to be located in a place that's convenient for people to come together. I think the challenge for corporate real estate is how do you deliver that? And the challenge for office real estate is how do you finance that? And what are you financing? So what does that place need to be?
Yeah, well, the one thing we haven't really covered actually is that, and I know you believe in this a lot, there's these meeting places that are critical that need to be fully redefined and resized. But then there's this like network of places, there are spaces really. Maybe that starts to become more spaces than places that people need to get their jobs done too. And it's a fascinating conundrum, that part of it, because a lot of people will tell you that they would love to have a network of locations to be able to tap into on demand, right? But then even the companies that actually offer that to them, a lot of the employees have a lot of inertia. They're not really willing to actually leave their homes. They say they want to leave their homes, but then they don't actually do it, even when they're empowered to do so. I don't have all the answers as to why that's the case, but it's a thing. It's happening, right? And the other end of the spectrum to the point you just made around financing, like the whole economy of real estate that has been built up really out of like human history's evolution, right? Like from basically like medieval times to, or even before that. Like the first office was like in ancient Greece or whatever, like first thing of an office like 3,000 years ago, or whatever, right? But from a post-industrial age perspective, we've built up all of this infrastructure and we valued it in a certain way that is in no way favorable to the changing demands of a workforce that's online first for all the reasons we've talked about, right? Like that's Stuart Butterfield line. Like we just don't have physical infrastructure that meets those needs and we can't value it right. And I'm a little bit like, I don't want to say pessimistic, but I'm confused about how it's going to change because I have an Airbnb, right? My wife and I, and we had a really difficult time getting insurance and a mortgage for that property. And Airbnb's been around since 2008. Like they're still considering my Airbnb to be volatile, right?
Well, it is volatile because you don't have a renter that's in there for a year at a time.
No, totally. But at the same time, it's like not volatile because there's just such a track record of showing that like people will show up and they are, right? And now again, like every Airbnb might be like have more or less volatility, just like every office asset that offers spaces and services, as many like to refer to it, will have different levels of volatility too. But there's just been no progress made to shift all of that, right? And then the third factor, so you got people who say they want to work a different way, but aren't actually doing it when given the choice, at least at enough of a volume to make it like go companies being like, holy crap, we got to change directions here, meaningful way, right? Then you got the whole economy of real estate on the other end of it. And in the middle is corporations that consider their workplaces these cultural shrines for better and for worse. Okay. And with that being the case, at least the focus of the moment from both a cognitive bias perspective and also from a sunk cost fallacy perspective in many instances, they're trying their damnedest to get everybody to come back to these offices, right? My personal opinion is you should be letting everybody kind of free in this phase of the evolution of work. Let them come to your offices just like Atlassian is, but also start to like test out different strategies, right? Because this isn't really actually about saving money on real estate. It should be about the planet, but we probably don't really give enough of a shit about that, unfortunately. But if you just look at it from a talent perspective, you should be thinking about like, what are you going to need to do to attract my daughter, right? Like when I asked my daughter, I have a video of this, so I put up on LinkedIn. I asked her at the beach, I said, honey, like, how far would you go to work from the office? And to her, like, the concept of an office is a very abstract thing in the first place. Like, she thinks it's like the room I work in the house. You know what I mean? But she also does know what offices are, and she knows what big buildings are and stuff. And I said, how long would you go? She's like, I don't know, like 10 minutes.
But how long would she go to get to the beach?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, it's a good point you're making, right? And that's where we're talking about, like, you know, the value of meeting places, right? Like, so, like, you know, she doesn't have enough of a perspective yet to maybe answer that second question that you just posed, or like, how long would she go to the beach? I.e., like, how far would she travel to like a really amazing workplace, right? I'm sure she will on some level. But it's just really fascinating to hear that she won't go farther than 10 minutes really to do her job, whatever that is. Yeah.
You talk about often the customer, the companies need to treat their employees like customers. I've been saying that office real estate needs to put the end user, the customer, at the center of the universe. And I think those two statements align to some extent. But I guess my question to you is, and maybe this is an opportunity for you to plug Kadence, but should office real estate be thinking about serving their customers beyond their four walls?
I think the answer is undeniably yes. I mean, you see this in the airline industry through like network partners. You see this in the hospitality industry. It's a thing, but it's like one of the murkier ones to deal with. Again, like it comes back to the whole financing thing. But I think really more than anything, the biggest hurdle is mindset. And I say that actually for commercial real estate industry people, you know, like that classic Upton St. Clair phrase, I'm going to update it to be more inclusive for 2024. It's impossible to get a person to understand something when their salary depends on their not understanding it. Like that's a moment we're living in. And it's not just the real estate industry. They're just the ones that have the spotlight right on them because like how they make their money is directly from the real estate. But employers are in the same boat, many of them, right? Like change is just so hard, right? Like employers, if they really wanted to just get behind this movement, they'd all be working with Liquid Space or Dasana or Kadence through our Kadence Flex product. Like every single employer in the world would already be doing that. But the reality is it's happening around the edges still.
Well, I think helping customers outside it to solve their real estate needs outside of their four walls is part of that puzzle. But I also imagine that there could be partnership opportunities between real estate companies and say Kadence for the Kadence Flex, but also to be able to help a company solve their resource management, their employee engagement within their four walls, but also help them solve their remote employees challenges, their distributed team challenges through partnerships with, say, Chris Hurd over at First Base. and sort of creating this turnkey bundled package. We like that in the consumer world. We talked about that last night, but do you think there's a future for that in real estate?
Do. So to maybe plug Cadence like for a minute, you can't search for what we're building. What you can search for is room and desk booking, which people have varied opinions on. What I would say about that is I think a lot of them have opinions that are based on pre-pandemic legacy tools that were not ever really designed with the employee in mind or the customer at the center of the universe, as you said. So we're in a moment of like education or re-education, because what we're building is a hybrid operating system or a hybrid home for employees with a hybrid AI co-pilot, to be able to like help them navigate where should they be on a given day. What are the working rhythms of their colleagues and how are they changing, and how might they get a smart suggestion around where to be or not be based on the changing working rhythms of their colleagues, right? Like, so it's around like people and location awareness and becoming discoverable to one another in ways that we have the privacy controls in place that actually right? And then it's other aspects of like, I was at the train line offices today and they're a Cadence customer, and I had a beautiful visitor management experience, right? Like I was booked into a meeting room with Darren Graver.
Shout out to Darren.
Yeah, he did it all through Cadence, right? So he scheduled us, he booked a room. I got a great visitor management email, totally seamless arrival experience, blah, blah, blah. So that's another aspect of our tool. We've got location and people awareness, that's sort of supported with meeting room and desk booking solutions to go with that. Like, where is everybody at? We've got great visitor management and sort of like building information, campus information, wayfinding. That's another aspect of our product. And then the third, which is an emerging category, is around event orchestration, right? Like framing going to the office around moments that matter from a macro level, like, at a quarterly basis or monthly basis or biannual basis, whatever the company decides, and then improving the daily office experience of those that decide they want to go there regularly with those like micro events or moments that matter or well-being experiences or whatever it may be, right? And then the fourth pillar of this new hybrid operating platform is on-demand space. Being able to have, book Cadence Flex, our partners with Liquid Space, right? Like, so an employee can literally come in and have a tool that integrates directly with either Slack or Microsoft Teams, or access it on mobile, or access it on web, wherever they want to be. They have an AI co-pilot that they can talk to say, like, who's going to be in the office next Tuesday? Oh, Caleb's going to be there. Great. Book me a desk near Caleb and a meeting room with Caleb and Dave, from 1 to 2. And that whole thing just gets done for them. Like, you can't search for that, but it's coming. It's already here.
Well, and the question is, who would be searching for it and who should be delivering it? And right now you're out there building a relationship with corporate real estate. But I also wonder if office real estate should be talking to corporate real estate to deliver this. I just,
in a bundle form.
Yeah. I wonder,
it's like what I love. I've known you for years. And what I love about you is like, you're thinking about things from such an ideal future state. Like, what should the ideal future state be?
We have to work backwards from that.
Yeah. And I agree with you completely. It's just a question of like, how much more clunky and longer will it be to disrupt it? Because, Uber disrupted the taxi industry so quickly because me, you, and all of our friends had immediate buying autonomy to make a different choice. The difference here is that employers are the ones that need to make buying decisions on behalf of their employees. So the interests have to be directly aligned. And as we have seen from talking through this, just today, the alignment is not there.
Well, it just goes back to what you said earlier, newer companies are the pipeline for this ideal future.
Yeah, absolutely. The change will happen from the bottom up. Like when I started as a broker, I was doing 5 and sometimes even 10-year office leases with companies that had 10 people. Like, how messed up is that, right? And this was 2012, right? But when we look at certain sub-markets within big cities, so I'll take Toronto as an example. So that the entertainment district or the downtown west, where we had Mexican food that night?
Yes, good tacos.
Yeah, so that play, like in that neck of the woods of Toronto, that had the lowest office vacancy of any sub-market in North America.
There's the answer, tacos.
Yeah. Well, now though, it's actually not the answer, Caleb, because it's 30% vacant, right? Which is insane. But it makes sense because the majority of the pool of companies that are in that sub-market are all younger companies that have evolved a lot more easily into this distributed and remote first way of working. And so will they carry real estate as they grow? Will they need on-demand real estate? Yes and yes. But the correlation between employee headcount and office uptake are becoming more inversely correlated by the day.
And no disclaimers at the end of that statement.
No.
Okay. I'm gonna call it right there because this has been a fantastic conversation. And you and I, we can go on for hours, and we have. I think there's probably hours of voice notes on my WhatsApp with Dave and Caleb. I've always loved our conversations, appreciated your perspective, whether I agree with it or not. More often I do than not. And I just very excited for your career and what you're doing, and I look forward to continuing reading your LinkedIn's.
So back at you, man. I can't wait to see what you do.
Awesome. Fist bump. Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care of yourself.